became really interested in the ketogenic diet in 2017. I went to Arlington, Virginia to a conference called Tripping Over Truth. And it was a conference about Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, cancer, and hormones. And I got, fortunately, invited to be a speaker on hormones. And I inevitably learned so much about how the ketogenic diet is being used to treat so many different illnesses. And my mom has Alzheimer's disease, so I was particularly interested in the fact that they were looking at how using ketogenics could help somebody in Alzheimer's. So I learned a lot about the science behind it, and of course, I mean, I'd heard of the Atkins diet, and I'd heard of low carbs diet. My brothers did the Atkins diet and lost like 30, 40 pounds back in the day. So I knew there was this thing where you could eat low carb, but I really didn't understand kind of how like beautiful the ketogenic diet could be in terms of health. So we'll talk a little bit about why that is. So the history of ketogenics goes way, 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 way back. So it goes way back to 500 BC, they think, so really far back. And of course, as we, our human bodies were basically meant to live in a state of ketosis on and off. And we know this because if you were to all fast for 24 hours, and if we didn't have the process of ketosis, we would all die. So ketosis is our alternative energy source. So most people function with carbohydrates or glucose as their primary energy source, but that's not really how it's supposed to be all the time. Humans were meant to actually go through periods of fasting and then actually going through periods of feasting. So like way back in the caveman day, you can think of like a man, and his tribe going out to kill the mammoth, and then everybody would feast on it, but then nobody would eat again for 30 days because the mammoth wouldn't come back for 30 days, right? So it was this very, normal process basically to be in a period of fasting. Yes, long time. And actually they've done studies on humans at this point where they have actually had them fast up to 321 days and still be fine. They put them in a lab, and so the human body was meant...
Like, we say fast, like zero.
Yeah, like nothing, water. And the body was meant to be able to, there's science has been studying this for years. So again, by the end of the 20th century though, they started to use this for a particular therapy, and that was for epilepsy, and particularly for pediatric epilepsy too. And they found that in these like small groups of children that they did this in these hospitals, that they would stop having seizures, and that actually if they stayed on a ketogenic diet for a period of 1 to 2 years, they could even phase out of the ketogenic diet and kind of quote unquote be healed of epilepsy. So the research is probably the most strong in ketogenics and epilepsy, just because that's what's the science has been used in that area for the longest period of time. So it improves epilepsy, but we now know that it improves Alzheimer's and dementia. It improves Parkinson's disease. It improves migraines and headaches. Improves depression and anxiety, and improves the outcomes of traumatic brain injury. So these are the ones where science has proven that ketogenics actually can help. So you can find this research at that website, ketonutrition.org/science. So they'll put it all in one place then. And this is kind of interesting. This is a video of a man. He was actually at the conference Tripping Over Truth that I was at, and he has Parkinson's disease. And so, let me see if we can hear this. I'm kind of frustrated by the fact that originally this sound came out of the TV, so I'm not sure why. I'm going to try to re-hook up here.
2 hours and 15 minutes since I had my last medication. My medications are up to date. And this is normal.
So he's just describing, like, after he comes off of his Parkinson's meds, he'll go into his state of having tremors.
Whatever. Also today, I haven't taken any DHB. There you have it.
taking a
July
product to raise the
31st,
ketone
and
levels
I took
super
my
high.
meds about 5:15, 3 hours 15 minutes ago, and I should be off by now, but I've been driving my beta hydroxybutyrate levels up, so I took something that drove them up at the same time, and just wanted to do a few things so that you can see what my motor state was.
Shiny, no tremors, all gone, just by being in ketosis. That's pretty much it for that. So again, what he was taking, and he actually worked with a researcher whose name is Dr. Richard Veach, who has done a ton of research in this area. How come it won't let me do that full screen thing? And Richard Veach has developed a substance that is basically allowing for your body to, you can take in these, like he mentioned BHB, that's called beta hydroxybutyrate, and it's a salt that this researcher, Richard Veach, has discovered that puts your body instantly, by drinking this salt that's terrible, it apparently tastes like turpentine, but it'll take you from a zero state of ketosis up to like such a high level that like the experience puts this man, it's almost like a medication state, so his tremors completely stop. So again, it's kind of this super powerful tool. Now, you don't have to have that beta hydroxybutyrate salt to do that. We have the ability to do it on our own. And you can do that through your diet, and you can do it through fasting as well. So again, this is something that most people, the ketogenic diet is a great idea for, but it's not a great idea for every person. So I'm not going to say that ketogenic diets are for every person out there. Every person's body is individual, and so we need to always take that into account. But for the most part, 1 in 2 persons in the United States have prediabetes at this point. And that's largely due to the fact that we went through, and I'm sure many of you went through here, the 80s and this what I call the snack well phenomenon years. So I remember in college being so fearful of fat, and I would walk a mile from my college campus to go to TCBY to get low-fat yogurt, because I thought I wouldn't get fat if I just ate low-fat. And so I would eat the Snackwell cookies. I still love those vanilla cream Snackwells. I would go to TCBY a lot, and I was fearful of ever touching a hamburger or anything with fat in it. And so that was the problem that we went through, because we were told that fat is bad and fat is not bad, sugar is bad, and that's why we're living in a state of now 1 in 2 people having prediabetes. So the ketogenic diet is good for most people. That doesn't mean it's easy, but it is good for most people. So to understand this, you have to understand the biochemistry of metabolism. So again, most of us are sugar burners. The vast majority of us eat a lot of carbohydrates throughout the day, and that allows our bodies to fuel itself with the sugar that we give it. And of course, sugar needs insulin in order to drive it into the cell to create energy. But without sugar, your body again has this backup mechanism of putting yourself into another state of energy, and that's called ketosis. So when sugar is not available, so when you've depleted the body of enough carbohydrates and sugar, it will go to your liver and it will take out this cell called a ketone, and a ketone is instant fuel. The cool thing about ketones is that they go straight through the body and they don't need insulin. So when you're in a ketosis state, you are not using insulin at all, and that's actually a really good thing for the body, especially when so many of us have this insulin resistance because we've driven so much sugar into our cells. At this point, our insulin is just tired. So this is a really instant way to get energy and to fuel the body. I love Dr. Jocker, so if you're looking for a website that you can get a ton of information on ketosis, Dr. Jockers is someone that I've looked to. He's also a really Christian man, and so I really like the fact that he puts his Christianity out there as well. So he has a lot of great slides like this where he just kind of in a very layman's way or basic way shows you how things work. So again, in a traditional diet that's higher carbohydrate, you use your glucose levels rise, your pancreas secretes insulin, and then that insulin causes that glucose to be shoved into the cell, and that's what creates energy. But for a lot of us, we eat too much sugar, right? And so it ends up you're pushing so much sugar into the cells have to do something with it, so you have to store it. And what does it get stored as? It gets stored as fat. And so that's why a lot of us then end up with obesity, because we're eating so much sugar, our body just is trying to figure out what to do with all this stuff, so it's putting it in a storage place. So with the keto diet, again, the glucose levels rise, but the body has to use another source of energy if there's no actual carbohydrates or glucose present, so it goes to the liver, and it takes from your stores, they're called glycogen stores, and it instantly produces something called ketones. And it will also then take it from your fat cells when it runs out of it in the liver as well, which is why the ketogenic diet is so amazing at losing weight. And the vast majority of people who do it right are going to lose weight, and they're going to lose it fast, because the body just has to be able to, again, fuel itself. In the absence of carbohydrates, it's going to go seeking that fuel readily and quickly. So unlike the traditional pyramid where we had lots of grains and whole grains that we were supposed to eat, the ketogenic diet basically flips the pyramid, the food pyramid that maybe you grew up with, on its head. So instead of, having lots of healthy grains and carbohydrates, now we're going to basically have as our largest portion of food fats. And it's a lot of fats. So it's like 70 to 80 to 90% even healthy fats, that's going to be the mainstay of your diet. And again, it seems weird to us. Why wouldn't fat make you fat? But it actually doesn't. In fact, if you only ate 80 to 90% of fat, you could never get fat. Because fat, and in order for fat to be stored, you have to have insulin. And fat will not be stored if insulin is not produced, and insulin cannot be produced in the absence of carbohydrates. So you can never get fat by eating that much fat. So again, the second, these are called macronutrients, would be your protein source. That's somewhere between 15 to 25%, maybe upwards of 30% of protein. And then you've got your non-starchy vegetables. And with vegetables, there are some vegetables that are higher carbohydrates, so you have to be careful. So you've got to look at vegetables that are less starchy, like leafy greens, cauliflower, broccoli, usually the ones that aren't like corn, potatoes, the traditional ones that kind of the easiest to get. Those are going to be more left off for the most part. And then you've got dairy is also, for the most part, non-carbohydrate. But if you've ever looked at milk, and milk is a sneaky source, we don't think of milk as having sugar, but even half and half, those are all full of carbohydrates. So dairy can be a source of sugar, so you have to be careful and read labels, but there are lots of dairies that don't have any carbohydrates at all, like cheeses, sour cream, and heavy whipping cream as well, which can be a great way to use in your coffee. And then berries and nuts, lots of nuts and seeds are going to be great on a keto diet, but even within the nuts, there are some that have more carbohydrates and some that have less, so you have to be careful about that. And I generally, for the most part, will tell people really not to eat much fruit at all. I really think fruit can be a problem for people because fruit is just sugar. It's not much different than eating a donut. It's just plain, simple sugar, although you do get some more nutrient value with it. So you're going to do better if you limit that. Now, a few blueberries, few raspberries, few strawberries, very few, with that heavy whipping cream for a treat, that can be a great idea for when you have those cravings. Of course, on the keto diet, your cravings definitely change and the sugar cravings go away. So again, these are your macros in terms of how this looks. So your carbohydrate is going to be less than 50 grams a day. And for some people, it needs to be even less than that. It probably needs to be less than 30 grams a day in order to really trigger that weight loss. And then ideally, you're going to eat about 1.1 to 1.5 grams per kilogram body weight of protein, and it should be less than about 120 grams for most people a day, and that's about 15 to, again, 20 to upwards of 30% of the diet. And then your fat, you should eat until you're full with fat. Basically, that should be 70 to 80% and even upwards of 90% of your diet, which is hard to do. We're not used to eating that much fat. So that's where this is the hard part. You really have to kind of like have the right things around. And the challenges that people have is that sometimes it's easy to eat protein, but it can be harder to kind of get that fat in. So can you do this for a lifetime? Yes. You can basically, like if you have a goal, like maybe your goal is you want to lower inflammation in your body. Maybe your goal is you do want to lose weight. You can do keto for a certain amount of time and get to your goal, and then you can find this kind of lifestyle with keto, which may mean you do it 80% of the time, and then 20% of the time you're not in keto. And so there's a balance then. But if you keep it as a part of kind of the mainstay of your life, eating it through the week, you're not going to gain back the weight. If you go back to a completely traditional diet, you certainly will. But you can do this, and you can just kind of make it like your Monday through Friday, you could say. And then on the weekend, maybe they call it carbing up sometimes, and allow yourself more carbohydrates. And a lot of the really like great health integrative medicine people, this is how they live their life. So you can do it for a long time. You can kind of moderate it at some point. It completely stabilizes blood sugars, and they've even now studied it in type 1 diabetics, and it can actually help stabilize their blood sugars so that they don't have to be on as many medications. The cravings for food go down. And I can, from personal experience of doing it for months, you just stop craving sugar, which, I mean, that's such a huge problem for most people is the sugar craving. So once you get into this adapted state with ketosis, your cravings for sugar definitely go away. For the most part, energy levels go up, your skin looks better, you feel better, because that inflammation in your body goes down so much. So you want to make sure it's safe. So if you have a chronic health condition like type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, if you have kidney or liver disease, if you have gallbladder disease, it's probably best to talk to your doctor about whether this is going to be right for you. And maybe you need to be monitored while you're on a keto diet just to make sure that you're doing well on it. So talk to your doctor if you have health conditions.
What if you don't have a gallbladder?
Then it still can be kind of a struggle with ketogenics if you don't have a gallbladder. And it means sometimes you just need to take some digestive enzymes, eat certain foods that help kind of with processing some of those foods. And usually most people without a gallbladder can still do it. It just needs to be kind of adapted to make sure you're feeling well on it. But like you don't make that bile from your gallbladder, but it does come from your liver instead. So it needs maybe just enough little help that it goes through the digestive system. So when you go on a keto diet, the first thing that happens is you start to excrete out electrolytes. It's just kind of the way the body kind of has to adapt. So you're going to lose electrolytes in the beginning. And this is where some people will talk about feeling the keto flu, is that they start excreting more water, they start peeing a lot, and because their sodium levels start to change, they feel like they're kind of sick and tired. And so one way you can do that to not get into this state is to really be focused on getting your electrolytes. And you can do this by having an electrolyte supplement, or a lot of the people who recommend keto diets just say keep Himalayan salt around. And when you're drinking water throughout the day, throw a teaspoon of Himalayan salt in there and drink the salt in the water. And that'll restore some of the lost sodium that you're losing basically, especially in that initial kind of adapting to the keto diet. You want to make sure you're getting potassium, and that, again, making sure you're getting those really, really good greens into your body where you get that natural source of potassium is great. Most people don't get enough magnesium. We think of vitamin D deficiency, but magnesium deficiency is a huge problem as well. If you're getting like night muscle cramps, if you get twitching, if you get pain, if you have constipation, if you get headaches, you probably are magnesium deficient. So in your packet, I have a resource for a supplement on that. So a lot of people, it's just a good idea to take magnesium. Our food sources for magnesium are a little bit shy. So like nuts and meats are where we get some of it, sometimes dairy, but there's not a lot of magnesium in our foods. Calcium you can get from bone broth and dairy products, obviously, vitamin D, again, dairy and eggs. And I mean, everybody should, and through the winter, be supplementing with at least 2,000 IUs a day of vitamin D3. Some people even need more than that, But if you're not taking vitamin D, you really should be. This is one of my favorite guys too for learning about like all sorts of things. This guy's into longevity, which is like you're trying to figure out how you can't die. You know, his name is Peter Attia. In the picture here, this guy's a genius. He's a physician, and he's just like one of those that had like some sort of like genius IQ at the age of 8 and went and finished medical school by the time he was 18 or something. So he's a really smart guy, and he became like a huge triathlete, top of his game, nationally renowned. But this is him at the top of his game in sports. He was fat. And one day his wife said to him something about, I think she was pregnant at the time, and she made a joke about his belly being pretty comparable to hers. And, you know, he was like, oh, you know, I really need to think about this, you know, and he was a typical American diet probably. So he just initially just took away all sugar, and he had lost a lot of weight just removing sugar out of the diet. And then he just researched a ton about diet and experimented on himself, and this is him now, and he's just really a smart guy. So he'll do podcasts on all sorts of things, not just ketosis. But you would think, you know, when we think of athletes that they need a lot of carbohydrates, right? You kind of hear like people need a carb like load before they do a meet or before they're going to run, and actually that's a problem for most of them, especially like marathon runners, because again, you will run out of carbohydrate energy pretty quickly. And so those people, when they think of like hitting that crash when you're in the run, that's where they hit their carb like bottom out. And so what they figured out is with athletes, if now it's kind of the rage in terms of how athletes do this, but if they put them into a state of ketosis and they stay in a state of ketosis, they can go on forever. They can run forever. So now you got guys like just carrying around like coconut oil fat and just popping that through while they're running. And it keeps their ketone levels high. And so the biggest athletes in the world, they're probably all learning about this now and doing it. But again, inflammation. So most of us who live the way we do as a typical American, we have inflammation. Inflammation due to our diet, inflammation due to the environment, inflammation due to stress. And there's numerous now support to show that the ketogenic diet decreases inflammation significantly. And any kind of low-carb diet can do that. And people worry about cholesterol and eating a lot of fat. For the most part, the vast majority of studies are showing that in most human persons, that actually being on a ketogenic diet improves your LDL and lowers your LDL and lowers your triglycerides. So it's favorable to the cardiovascular health. Now, there's a very small sect of people who have a genetic issue where they don't convert fat the right way, and sometimes those will be people that will see their numbers kind of drive up instead of down. And so that's why it's good, if you have heart disease in your family, early heart attacks, maybe to get your baseline lipid profile done before you start a keto diet and watch those numbers, and we can kind of keep that in check. Because like I said, it's not necessarily for every single person. So when you go on a keto diet, you're eating 3 times the amount of saturated fat compared to other diets. However, studies show that the actual blood levels of saturated fat decrease. And they did a study one time where it was on animals, and they fed one, I think it was mice, so they fed one group of mice like a typical kind of sugar-based diet, not sugar, but just carbohydrate-based diet. And then they put the other mice on a ketogenic diet. And then they killed the rats, and then they opened them all up. And they found that the rats that were on the ketogenic diet were thin, and inside there was no fat to be found. And on the rats that were on the carbohydrate-based diet, there was fat stored in all sorts of places in their body. So you can be skinny fat. And we see that in people sometimes they're eating unhealthy, but maybe genetically they just don't store as much fat, but on the inside they're actually storing fat around their organs. And that can be an unhealthy state to be in as well. I put this website, this vertahealth.com. This is Sarah Hallberg, and she has a ton of great videos, very, very simple to listen to. I know this is going to be completely overwhelming for a lot of you listening to all this. And so going back to like Sarah Hallberg's this Verta Health, she's very, very good at just slowly kind of explaining it in terms of how the keto diet works. Okay, so when you're getting going on this, these are kind of typical mistakes. Sometimes people go into it too fast for their body. So if you're somebody who's, you're sensitive to changes, you should probably do this slowly. So maybe what you do is you start, again, cutting out processed foods and sugars first, then cutting out all your grains. and then slowly increasing your fat over time. So you can do it slowly, because some people, if they do it too fast, they're going to get the keto flu, and then within a week they're done, and they don't want to do it anymore. So if you know you're sensitive to change, then you can do this slowly. You don't have to dive 100% in at once. For the most part, you want to avoid dirty keto, and that's kind of like, again, the Atkins diet, where you have like the diet where you just eat hot dogs and bacon and steaks, and yeah, those are all low carb, and it would put you into a state of ketosis, but it's not as healthy eating, obviously. So you want to limit your proteins to some degree, and you want to increase those vegetables and really focus on the fats. So it can be easy, again, to eat the proteins, and I struggled with that. Doing it is just, when there's nothing else to eat, sometimes salami and cheese works. And obviously we have a lot in the back there, so, but, you really have to kind of watch your protein intake, because if you eat too much protein, you are going to have that turn into carbohydrates as well. So protein, if it's in too high amounts, will turn into sugars. And so you have to keep your protein levels in check, and you have to keep those fat levels high enough, and that will, again, keep you in that particular state of ketosis that leads to that weight loss. So again, you want to focus on the healthy, clean keto, which is like eggs and coconut oil and olive oil, clean meats, wild-caught seafood, salmon's great, low-carb veggies, herbs are great, pickles are great, and I have some like, I don't know if your mom ever made pinwheels growing up, but every Thanksgiving we had pinwheels, so I made sure I made pinwheels, because those are a fun pickle, cream cheese, prosciutto. Yeah, my mom called them pinwheels. Maybe that's not what, I don't know what other people call them. Yeah, so those are really good too. And you can have some sweets per se, and there are some sweeteners that are okay on the keto diet, particularly monk fruit, erythritol, and a little bit of stevia. Now you don't want to go crazy on even the artificial sweeteners, because that's going to keep your cravings for sugar higher, and obviously your goal is to get away from that. But you can have some sweeteners, and you can make, there's all sorts. If you go to Omaha Bakery and Whisk and Measure, those two places in Omaha, if you want to try some keto desserts, go to Omaha Bakery and go to Whisk and Measure. And just try them out, and then go home and look up the recipes for them, because basically you can make them at home too. But there are a way to have treats. I like, and I think I put it in the packet, Choco Zero. They're these little bars with low carb chocolate with almonds, and those are super, super good. So I like my treats too. Okay, so second mistake people make with keto is just eating too much and too often. So you can still eat too much. Not everybody has a limit, but for some people, they're just eating too much, and that's why they're not losing weight. Or they're eating too much dairy, and you can feel bloated and gassy if you're getting too much dairy. So that may be a sign you need to back off on the dairy, especially if you're gaining weight instead of losing. Because if you're doing ketosis right, it should kind of melt off that fat. And on the flip side, sometimes you cannot eat enough, and you're under eating, and that can also be a problem. Your body will go into kind of a starvation mode to some degree. And you can kind of start having brain fog and fatigue, and that's not as good either. So you've got to have the foods around that you can eat. If you don't have them around, you're going to be like, I don't know what to eat, and then you just give up on it. So you've got to fix your pantry to have the ketosis foods available. If you don't do that first, you're going to get frustrated by it, and you're going to give up. You got to drink a ton of water, because again, like I said, you're going to be peeing out more water, so you got to drink lots of water. You got to hydrate super well, and that helps, of course. Our bodies are 75% water, so you're going to at least drink 32 ounces of water a day. You can put lemons and limes in them. You can add that Himalayan salt, because that's a mistake that a lot of people have, is that they get low on salt, and then that electrolyte imbalance occurs, and they start to feel not well on that. So you can eat also things that have more salt in them, like sea snacks. I think those are like the seafood little snacks, wild-caught fish, pickles, kimchi, kale, avocados, bone broth, salted olives. So all of those things can add more salt too, and are also all keto friendly. So constipation can be a problem. Obviously, you're switching your diet completely, so constipation can be a common side effect to the keto diet. So again, magnesium is a great way if you take that every night to kind of keep that at bay. I like this stuff called oxy powder. You can buy that on Amazon. It's called oxy powder. It's a oxygen-based magnesium, and that really can help keep you normal. Or I like magnesium glycinate as well. Or you can just kind of keep playing around with those vegetables and making sure you're getting enough vegetables. The other thing you can do for constipation is add psyllium husk. Trader Joe's has a great psyllium husk powder that you would just add a couple of teaspoons of that, and that adds that extra fiber as well. Okay, so again, many people eat too much protein to start out, and that can be a problem because it'll convert to carbs. So we got to watch our protein. You need to find more fat sources because that's the hardest part, is really getting up to that 80% of fat. So again, you can have breakfast with eggs. You can add coconut oil into your eggs. You can add butter as well as clarified butter is probably the Kerrygold is the most common brand that people think about as good, healthy, clarified butter. You want to avoid soybean oils, but there are some keto-friendly dressings, blue cheese dressing. If you just, again, read labels, remember it's not just the sugar content on the label, it is the carbohydrate content. So you got to look at both. You can sometimes be like, oh, this doesn't have very much sugar, but it has 25 grams of carbs in it, and that's going to blow you out of ketosis. So you got to turn that around. And then you want to get your omega-6 fats by eating fish. 3 times a week would be ideal. I know that's not always easy. But again, lots of healthy fats like olive oil, real butter, coconut oil. And then, what was I going to say? Oh, it just flew out of my brain. Apparently I'm not in ketosis. I'm just trying to get back into ketosis after Thanksgiving, right? So it can take a couple days. So people, and then cost for a keto diet can be an issue, right? I mean, we're trying to eat affordably. So you do have to kind of figure out where you can, find foods that are at a low price that are keto. And I do think it's possible. For example, this website here, Midget Mama, and I linked that in your packet as well. That's good, Terry. That has like a keto shopping. That has a keto shopping list for Aldi's, Target, Baker's. I think pretty much every store you can get on that Midget Mama to show you what is keto friendly, on Amazon as well. And so that's really helpful. So then you can find kind of the price things. Tonight, like for a lot of my stuff I got from Aldi's. Spinach artichoke chip is a great one for low carb. So yeah, the big thing is, and I've had some friends and a couple family members like trying to do this with me, is that you do have to be perfect in some way on this if it's going to work. So you can't, a particular friend of mine, she would do so great, and she'd get to she'd be like, oh yeah, I ate keto really, really well. But I got to dinner and there was nothing to eat, so I ate some Doritos and you're like, yeah, it's not gonna work because that your whole day's gone then really, because it kicks you instantly out of ketosis once you get your carbohydrate levels back up. So in order for it to really work, you really do have to kind of maintain. It's not one you can cheat on. At least until you're kind of what we saw, keto adapted, fat adapted, and you're in that place where you can move to that kind of 80-20 plan. So you do need that kind of perfection. This is another guy, Thomas DeLure. He's an expert in ketogenic diets. He used to be 285 pounds and lost I'm sure over 100 pounds. So you can go on YouTube and you can look up how to eat clean keto on a budget. He takes you through all these, and he picks up things and tells you if they're okay, basically. So it was one of the videos I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. There's just so much information out there that you can learn about keto in terms of, finding what things to eat. Oh my gosh, there's recipes galore. You can, buy a book about it, but you don't have to because it's there's literally so much on the internet that you could read. And what if I don't have a gallbladder? So you need to make some modifications so you can digest fat better. It can be more of a challenge since you need that bile to break down your fats, and so you don't make it from your gallbladder, now you make it from your liver. MCT oil and coconut oil is really good because those two things don't need bile to be used. So an MCT oil is awesome. It's basically what comes from coconut oil. You can buy it in a bottle. You can drink it down. It has no taste at all. It'll instantly keep your ketones higher. And that's what they're giving basically some Alzheimer's patients, just flat out MCT oil daily.
I don't suppose you can get that at Aldi's.
I bet you can. I am not positive.
Oil?
You can get MCT oil pretty much. It used to be it was hard to find, but you can find cheap brands of it on Amazon now. Decent brands of it. I think you can. I think my husband bought it at Aldi's. I'm not positive, but we have a bottle at home that I know he got So you can find MCT oil almost anywhere now.
So it's not like as if you don't buy the high quality MCT, it's not going to be good for you. I mean, you know,
Yeah, I mean, right. I mean, you just have to look at the back of the label. I mean, if it looks like the ingredients are pure, like it should just say, you know, comes from a medium chain triglyceride, it says probably caprylic acid or something like that. It shouldn't have a bunch of extra ingredients. If it does, then it probably is a little bit more processed. So, and also, like, you want to eat smaller meals with a gallbladder issue, and a digestive enzyme supplement can be helpful. What if I have thyroid issues? Thyroid issues, including Hashimoto's, is not uncommon, especially in women. The ketogenic diet can be great for a lot of autoimmune conditions, but particularly for the thyroid. It helps with fibromyalgia, it helps with rheumatoid arthritis, it helps with many, many different types of autoimmune diseases because of its ability to decrease inflammation in the body so quickly. So some people with autoimmune diseases do better, though, getting the dairy out as well. So sometimes you just kind of have to trial and error with that, but if dairy, you're sensitive to it, and basically you would know, because if you're having a lot of gut issues, digestive issues, or if you continue to have a lot of joint aches and pains, that can be a sign you need to remove that dairy also off your plate, which there is dairy substitutions. There's almond milk, there's coconut milk, there's cashew milk, and those are all in then butters. So there's a lot of options for non-dairy eating people as well.
and those things don't have a lot of sugar in them.
No, most of them don't. You have to read labels, because like milk products can, if it has true dairy from milk, it will have sugar, but most of the almonds and the nut-based milks and butters do not. So again, if you have, over 65% of the population is actually lactose intolerant. So it's not a small population that probably shouldn't be drinking milk. I mean, that was another thing that kind of we were told is really good for us, milk, drinking it, but we're the only mammals that continue to drink milk from from a cow after we're weaned from our mothers. No other mammals do that. So it may not necessarily be the best, because casein in milk is inflammatory, and lactose can be inflammatory and difficult for some people to digest, again, when they're lactose intolerant. So you can substitute ghee, coconut oil, coconut milk, cashew milk and butter, almond milk and butter. There's a lot of other ones too. If you have allergies, if you have digestive issues, if you have eczema and rashes and itchiness and skin issues and sinus problems, probably dairy is a good thing to eliminate, probably. So long term, again, this is kind of that idea that you're going to be in this 80-20 maybe. Your protein won't ever change. You're going to keep that always between 15 to 20 to 25%. Your carbohydrates may adjust, though. As you continue to get fat adapted, you'll be able to have days where you have more carbohydrates, and then you'll have days where you need to kind of stay in that more low carbohydrate. And your calories can adjust based on, again, how many fats you're eating. Again, because in ketosis, straight up ketosis, fat will not store fat. Fasting, again. So what's the other way you can put yourself into ketosis? Just don't eat. If you don't eat for 8 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours, you are in ketosis. So a lot of people are hearing about intermittent fasting. Of course, in our Christian and Catholic faith, fasting is a staple of our spirituality. So it can come easy to us to have a day of fasting. So some people fast every Wednesday or fast every Friday, and their bodies go into ketosis during that. And they've shown that there's many, many health benefits just from doing that type of fasting. You can do something called a 16-8 rule, where you don't eat after dinner, and then you don't eat again until lunchtime or right after. That's generally what I do at this point. Now, I still have my coffee, and I still put my cream in my coffee, but I don't eat any food until after lunch. And my gut, my stomach just feels a ton better just doing that. So you have less time during the day that you're putting your stomach to work, and that keeps your stomach happier, actually. Not having to all day kind of deal with digesting food. You can also, again, consider the 24-hour fast and do that once a week. Sometimes it's good to do a 3-day water fast for some people. And that's a really detoxifying thing to do. You won't die, I promise. My husband and my daughter, who's only 17, do 5-day water fast twice a year. 5 days. So you will not die. And again, they put a man into a room, only gave him water and maybe some electrolytes for over 300 days, and he was fine. So our bodies are adapted to be able to do this. You need water, but you don't need food.
But they took supplementary vitamins and...
Not really, just a little bit of electrolytes.
Dr. Kitty, will you kind of, if you do a a 1 day of fast a week, you know, will you get used to it? Because I know when I just did a colonoscopy, the first day, all I thought about was food. And then the second day, it went away. But
Right.
we kind of get
Yes,
used to
absolutely.
it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. Everything is hard when you make a big change in the beginning. And again, I think what Ketogenics does is it makes it easier not to eat food. You actually stop caring about food a little bit. So your ability to do a 1 day fast just becomes easier. So this diet actually helps that. But yes, it's hard in the beginning, but once it's routine, like I had a midwife student that was with me for this last year, over 6 months, and every Sunday she fasts all day, 24 hours, every Sunday. That was her thing. So, you know, there's a lot of people out there doing it, and there's lots of health benefits for it. So again, you need to be successful. There's also other things you have to look at in your life. You need to reduce the crazy, the stress. You need to do things that bring you joy. You need to keep a daily prayer life. You need to practice deep breathing daily. You need to be grounded, and you need to get your feet into the dirt. Like, we need to always connect ourselves with like the earth that God gave us, and we also need to exercise. So diet isn't everything. Again, this is an amazing diet plan for a lot of people, but there's all sorts of other things holistically that we need to think about as humans. If you're interested